Take a look at this, folks, if you don't mind. Mould-infested showers, no running water, filthy bathrooms, wells made out of wheelie bins. Absolute squalor. These are the conditions on Manus Island. And this is what Christopher Pyne had to say about the issue on the show a little earlier.
The message from the government's very clear. Anyone who's come via people smugglers will not end up in Australia.
Do you have any sense of humanity?
Of course, Karl, and I'm very sorry that those people...
This morning.
No, in fact, Karl, those people could be in new, fresh detention centres in West and East Lorengau and Hillside House.
Get Up's Human Rights Director, Shen Narayanasamy, joins us now. Shen, thank you for your time this morning. You're responsible for this vision. What were conditions like when you were over there?
Absolutely horrific. I've worked in places all across the world, post-conflict zones, and this is the worst I've ever seen.
Just to describe it to us.
It was oppressively hot and humid. People were sleeping outside. There was only shipping containers. They were rusty. People were lying around with obvious illnesses. Medication had run out. There was no water. People were drinking out of rubbish bins. It was absolutely horrific conditions.
There are some 600 people in that centre?
There are 600 people in the centre.
They have a choice. They can move, can't they?
They can, but no one would stay in those conditions unless they had to. And the situation that we found was that locals were protesting their removal from the camp. And the refugees inside have significant fears that they face real violence if they should move out.
600 people have those fears?
600 people.
The people who have already moved into the new facilities, how many? About 70? About
70.
Have any of those fears been realised for those people who have moved to the new facilities?
There have been significant acts of violence even over the last 4 years, but the reality is it's an impossible choice. I mean, do you die a slow death inside the detention centre, or do you go out and you risk violence? It's not cut and dried, it's just completely impossible. I know, but their immediate fear, the most immediate fear is for their own safety. And the most immediate concern for them is where they're living right now. If they go to the new centre, and the people who have moved, the 70 or so, haven't actually faced any of those threats, then why not move? Oh no, many of them have faced threats. Many people carry the scars of attacks. Locals themselves tell us that 7 people outside the centre have died on Manus Island in the last 4 years, and there have been no successful prosecutions. There's a real question of impunity on the island.
Peter Dutton has dismissed the United Nations claims that the alternate accommodation is not ready. Did you see much of the new accommodation? We didn't,
but the Australian journalist who was on the island has documented extensive photos that the accommodation...
It was pretty obvious, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Asylum seekers say they fear the violence from the local community. But did you see any evidence of that, as you say?
We saw significant protests from the local community, and we also spoke to local leaders who termed what the Australian government was doing as an invasion. And I think that's a real indicator that we could be seeing significant unrest on the island. There's a big difference between protests and the eventuality of threats and of physical violence. Do you concede? We can see that, but the reality that you've got to understand is that the alternative accommodation sits right in a community, and that community is protesting. I don't even know how people, if the military wants to move people in there, I don't know how they're going to get in there without violence occurring. OK, I do concede that. I think that is going to be a mess when they come in and forcibly remove. Just one final question for you. The government has accused activist groups vis-à-vis EGU of giving the refugees false hope they may one day settle in Australia. How do you respond to those claims? People are existing in the worst conditions I've ever seen. Nobody, no activist could convince anyone to stay in that place. I barely lasted 8 hours. It's not activists. The reality of the situation is that we have a humanitarian emergency and these people need to be evacuated. Shen, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it. Karl. Sylvia.